Well, this one has to do with the World Health Organization experts who have confirmed SAHPRA's regulatory processes that they are efficient to ensure the quality, safety and efficacy of vaccines controlled by the entity. This now ranks the organization at functional maturity level 3. Let's get more on what exactly does this mean and what the special accolade is for. And we speak to the CEO of the organization at the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. That's Dr. Boitumelo Semete-Makokotlela. Doctor, thank you very much for your time. Let's start with exactly that functional maturity level 3. That's now your rank. What does it mean in plain language?
Sure. And thank you for having us this morning. I mean, we're particularly excited about this outcome. So there's in essence 4 levels of ranking with this WHO system from 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what this means is that as a regulator, our systems, our processes, our quality management systems, but also our compliance with our legal mandate and legal framework is that of a functional regulator. What it says is that the work that comes from SAHPRA is credible work. It is work that other regulators can even rely on because of the credibility of its systems. So it basically says that we're a well-functioning authority, and as I said, our systems are on par with other regulators.
So what might you say to critics who are of the view that, well, you did allow the Johnson & Johnson vaccine into the country, and now we are told that one in a few people, although the instances are very far and few in between, but there have been instances where people have died as a result of taking this vaccine. Does that still put you right up there?
Certainly. So what this means is that as a regulator, when we make a decision, what they assess, what the WHO assesses is that is the decision that you make based on credible scientific data that would have been provided to you? And also, do you have mechanisms in place to monitor the product along its life cycle? And once you are then made aware of any adverse drug reactions, etc., what do you then do with it? So there's always an expectation, right, that health products generally will have side effects. It's about how you identify those, how you monitor those, and what you then do. So in the case of the vaccine, for example, what they then had looked at was, what was the basis for us authorizing this vaccine? Did we have the scientific data? And once you then authorize it, do you then monitor it? Which we did. We have the Mac Safety app. We've had a number of webinars encouraging the public to report. And once a case has been reported, do you have mechanisms to assess whether it's causally linked to the vaccine or not? And once you can determine that, do you then have a mechanism to communicate that to the public? And what do you then do with the manufacturer? And basically, they were satisfied with what we've done. The issues of the 2 cases that we've reported of the Guillain-Barré syndrome are not unique to South Africa. We've seen that other regulators have also observed this, but it's about identifying them, engaging with the public, creating awareness around these, and ensuring that in the product information, that data is there. There is a warning for the healthcare practitioners to say, assess this and monitor the vaccinees for this.
You remember, Doctor, the infamous importation of a Cuban drug by the South African National Defense Force. You are the authority that is supposed to exercise control over any drug that comes into this country. How did that happen?
Thank you for that question. And, our role certainly is to ensure that any product that arrives in the country does so in a compliant manner. You do have those instances, right, where, applicants or individuals bring in products But the key thing is, do you have mechanisms to identify that? And when then you've been alerted to that, what do you do about it? Okay. So in this case, we were alerted to this matter. We engaged with the SNDF. We were very clear on what the regulatory requirements are. And we indicated to them that if they don't bring us data that shows that this is a drug that can be authorized, there's no ways that we can allow its use. But also it was brought in illegally, in a way, because it wasn't compliant with our requirements. And hence, as we speak today, this is a drug that has been returned to Cuba because they were not able to provide us this information. So our comfort is that when we are made aware of such, we act on it and we make sure that there's compliance with the law.
And I'm glad you mentioned that it was brought in illegally, to use your words. Do you become involved in the handling of this drug, where it is stored in the country before it is taken back to where it came from, which was the case here? And what about repercussions? Are you also part of that monitoring system to say, all right, this drug was brought in illegally, whoever authorized that must bear the consequences, but we also recommend that 1, 2, 3 be done in order to ensure that there is repercussions for those who broke the law, but also importantly that this is not going to ever happen again?
Certainly. So, when a product is brought in or procured illegally or non-compliant with the Act, what we then do is we either quarantine that product at the facility still, and we monitor whether it's compliant with that quarantine procedure, which is you're not supposed to use it, still keep it at the right condition. So we would go regularly to go and monitor that this drug is not being utilized by the SNDF. What we do also at times with others is that we confiscate the products. We bring them into our facility and we store them, and when the case is closed, we then destroy those products. So that's typically what we do. And what we apply, we're really consistent across the board, wherein there is non-compliance. What we then do is, once we have confirmed that there is certainly non-compliance, we work then with the law enforcement agencies, and also in this case, we would work with the Health Professions Council, because there was a non-compliance by a healthcare practitioner who then authorized that this product is brought in. And there's a clear understanding and knowledge in the sector that anyone who utilizes a product must make sure that it's compliant with the Medicines Act. So we've alerted the HPCSA on this matter. You may be aware that National Treasury looked at it from a compliance with the PMFA. You may be aware also that the Public Protector also looked at this, and there was a report and an article out on this. So we're working with the relevant law enforcement agencies.
So what does that mean, working with the relevant law enforcement agencies? Are you insinuating that someone is going to be held criminally liable and probably answer in court for why they brought or authorized the bringing in of this drug illegally?
Yeah. So what this means is that, for example, with PMFA, there's an outcome on that. So there would be whatever process that then they follow with National Treasury. For us, we've reported the individuals to the Healthcare Professions Council, because as SAHPRA, we're not a law enforcement agency. We enforce compliance with the Medicines Act. And then we would work with the police services. You may have seen in one of the articles that we indicated that we went, even for the inspection itself, we went with law enforcement agency because that's what we typically do. And where then there is a non-compliance with the Act, we would either open a criminal case. If it warrants that that's the case, we would report the individuals to the relevant statutory bodies, in this case the Health Professions Council, because then they can act. We can't act in that. So there's limits to our mandate, but where there are those limits, we make sure that the relevant stakeholders who then have the powers to institute any sanction are then able to.
Doctor, I'm sure you'll appreciate why I ask these questions. They were infamous events that occurred, which relates to why your organization is getting the accolades that it is getting today, it's as a result of that kind of scrutiny that you exercise. Another important event was the EFF marching to your offices because you wouldn't allow for the Russian vaccine Sputnik to come into this country. Does that remain the position of SAHPRA, that the Sputnik vaccine is not and still isn't foolproof enough for it to be administered into the arms of South Africans for COVID-19? And if so, why is that?
No, certainly. So that remains to be our position. And we've been engaging with the applicant in this case. We engaged with them even, early on when before we made the decision to make sure that they provide us the data that we required. And even when we made the decision, we communicated this to them. And the key thing for us is that we need to ensure that whatever vaccine that is made available in the country complies with safety. In this case, the applicant was not able to provide us with adequate safety data, and particularly wherein there is knowledge of a risk that the platform has presented in the past. We cannot negate that fact. If you remember, what we had reported at the time was that the platform that's utilized, when it was used for a different vaccine, we showed enhanced susceptibility to HIV. And knowing the HIV prevalence and burden in South Africa, we had to take that into consideration. And a key question we had asked them was, have you done studies that would indicate that that risk has been minimized? And if you do have that provided to us, we will assess it. And if we're then comfortable with the data provided that that risk has been minimized, we will then be able to authorize this vaccine. However, that data was not forthcoming. And so in the absence of that data, we cannot put the lives of the South Africans at risk because we know this fact. Based on studies that have been published, we've got those reports, and so we couldn't turn a blind eye to that. And so it remains to be the case that Sputnik is not authorized in South Africa.
Dr. Boitumelo Semete-Makokotlela, thank you very much for that explanation, and more importantly, congratulations on your recognition, CEO of SAHPRA.